We all love a good horror movie. There's something about being scared that's really appealing to us. On that note, what could be better than a horror movie based on a true story? These movies are the scariest of them all because you know that they could actually happen. Here, we'll discuss 5 horror movies based on true events and the terrifying true stories that had inspired them. The Conjuring. This movie is based on a true story of Ed and Lorraine Warren, who became famous ghost hunters in 1952. Ed was a former police officer and veteran who eventually took interest in demonology. Lorraine worked as a psychic medium, and she was responsible for making contact with the spirits her husband came across. As it turns out, the couple is actually involved with many of the true hauntings commonly known in the horror genre. Although the Warrens participated in a lot of different hauntings, they decided to focus on 2 particular families whose stories haunted them for years down the road. One of them was the Perron family that had inspired The Conjuring. The first Conjuring movie focuses on the Perron family who was being terrorized by a demonic presence who they believed was the angry spirit who used to live at the residence in the 1800s. The spirit, named Bathsheba, was a Satanist who had supposedly cursed the land where the Perrons are now residing. At one point during one of the seances conducted by the Warrens, the mother of the family they were helping was speaking a language she didn't even know. During the seance, her chair also started levitating and she was thrown across the room. The Warrens ended up documenting everything that happened, and this story is truly terrifying. The stuff that the Perrons went through in this whole deal is absolutely horrifying and will definitely make you think twice about staying in a haunted house. The Entity. The next movie on the list dates back to a true story that took place in the 1970s. This movie is based on a true story of Doris Beather. Doris was known for heavy use of drugs and alcohol and lived a pretty rough and difficult life. As you can imagine, because of this, a lot of people didn't take her claims seriously, and when a lot of bizarre things started happening to her, she wasn't able to get any help or answers. Apparently, the only reason anyone ever considered helping the woman was due to a friend of hers who overheard 2 parapsychologists talking and who took her interest in her story. The woman lived in a condemned home with her 4 children, and from the sounds of what happened, both the woman and her children were being terrorized by multiple entities in their home. Apparently, she would see these entities and they would attack her. Doris claimed 3 of the ghosts ended up sexually assaulting her, and she described scenarios where she was restrained by 2 of the spirits, all while the final one took advantage of her. This movie is not exactly the kind of ghost story we're used to hearing about, which makes this one a must-see for a different spin on a true haunting. The Haunting in Connecticut. This movie is based on the story of the Snedeker family who moved into a new home to be closer to the hospital, where their cancer-stricken son was receiving treatment. Carmen and Alan, who were the parents of this family, moved into a new home with their 3 boys, daughters, and 2 nieces, which in turn of events used to be a funeral parlor. Unfortunately, the family didn't find out about the history until after they moved in. The strange events that took place in the family home started with the oldest child. The boy started acting crazy and was later diagnosed with schizophrenia, and it wasn't long after that the rest of the family started also experiencing the hauntings happening in the old funeral parlor. At this point, they were pretty reassured in the fact that there was more at stake than a few mental health issues. Some of the craziest things that happened were both of the parents being sexually assaulted and water turning into blood. Kinda hard to discredit a story like that when multiple people are experiencing the same things. But a lot of people around them claim that if these stories were true, there's no chance that they would have stayed. I think it's safe to say most people would have moved if they experienced even half of what this family did. Most people probably would have left the moment they saw the bloody tools in the basement from the old morgue, but apparently the family was struggling with finances, which is inevitably why they chose to stick around as long as they did. Eventually, the family made contact with the Warren couple that is mentioned in the first movie, The Conjuring. Personally, I don't know how any family could ever go back to normal after being terrorized for months on end, and this movie will probably convince you to never buy a home that has a history with lots of dead people. The Amityville Horror. This movie is based on a true story of the Lutz family, who unknowingly moved into a house that was possessed by demons. Apparently, the family was notified prior to buying the home that an entire family living there had been murdered. The house even had some of the old family's furniture still inside. The family didn't seem to be fazed at the discovery of the home's dark past, which they would definitely regret later on. The story starts with the original events that occurred in the house with the previous family called the DeFeos. One of the 5 children of the DeFeo family ended up killing all of his siblings and his parents after claiming a demon forced him to do it. Fast forward to the next family moving in, the Lutz family. In 1975, George and Kathleen Lutz bought the house with their 3 children, and they started experiencing some crazy occurrences, like being woken up every night at 3:15 a.m. at the exact same time the DeFeo family was murdered. They even experienced seeing a demonic pig, and similar to some of the other movies, people in the family were being levitated from their beds. Unlike the family in The Haunting in Connecticut, this family didn't even last more than a month before being driven out of the house by the demonic presence. The fact that this family had to go through this whole ordeal is absolutely horrifying, and it will make you think twice about moving into a new home with a dark past. The Exorcist. Next, we have a classic that pretty much all of us watched or at least heard about, The Exorcist. Even though it's on the dated side, it might not be number 1 for special effects or graphics. The storyline itself is enough to scare anyone when combined with the fact that it actually happened to a young boy. The movie was inspired by actual events that took place in St. Louis, Missouri, to a young boy known as Roland Doe. From the sound of it, he started experiencing some pretty weird phenomenon right about the time his aunt died. His aunt used to teach him how to use a Ouija board and connect with the paranormal. Which brings us to the next part of the story that will probably make you think twice about ever attempting to use one yourself. Weird things started happening to Roland, including heavy furniture moving on its own, his mattress shaking when he laid on it, and a lot of other terrifying, unexplainable events. His parents eventually decided to have 2 exorcisms performed on him after every other option failed to help him. The first exorcism failed when the priest got injured in the process, and during the second exorcism, the mattress supposedly started violently moving. Scratches started to appear all over him, and at one point, an X was scratched onto his chest, which was thought to represent the number 10, also known as 10 demons possessing him. Eventually, he was taken to the hospital, where they called on St. Michael to save the boy, and the strange events seemed to have stopped. Later on, the boy was discovered to have been none other than a man named Ronald Heckler, who grew up to be a NASA engineer and led a pretty everyday life from the sounds of it. Somehow, he managed to keep the story of his childhood hidden from the people around him. If you haven't seen this movie, or you have and you weren't aware of the true story behind it, I suggest giving it a watch. So there you have it. If you are someone looking for a good scare, look no further than this list. These 5 horror movies based on true events will have you sleeping with the lights on for weeks to come. The fact that they are not just figments of someone's imagination, but real life events that happen to real people, only amplifies just how scary they actually are. So the next time you watch one of these movies, remember that what you're watching actually happened. Thanks for watching our late night top 5 video. We're a new channel and would love to have your support by subscribing, liking, or simply dropping a comment down below. To watch more interesting late night videos, click the links to continue watching more.